Hello and welcome to my follow-up review of the Retro Freak emulation console. There were a couple of things in the last video that I did that I did not anticipate or did not get a chance to focus on or test out or try, so I just wanted to cover a few of those things based on some of the questions and the comments that I had from my previous video. So someone asked me if the Retro Freak recognizes the Super Game Boy, and in a sense it does. I'll go ahead and load it in. And it's not recognizing, so shit. Try that again. Now the Super Game Boy is extremely tight in the pins, and it almost feels like I'm going to break it every time I try to pull it out. So I don't like putting it in, but just for the sake of showing you guys what happens, I'll go ahead and do that. So I have Mega Man 3 for the Game Boy inserted into the Game Boy, the Super Game Boy, and the Super Game Boy inserted into the Retro Freak. Try that again. So I don't want to install it, I just want to play it. So what happens is it will go to the Super Game Boy, you know, the screen, but it will not recognize the game in the Super Game Boy, which is really unfortunate. However, you know, my thoughts on that is if it has a Super Game Boy, or I'm sorry. So my thoughts on that are, if it's got a Game Boy port or a Game Boy Color port like it doesn't really matter anyway. I guess maybe for nostalgic reasons or messing with colors, people might want to actually use that. But again, I've tried inserting and taking the game out like I did just there, and that happens. I've tried, oh jeez, I've tried putting the game in, or the Super Game Boy in first, then putting the Game Boy in, and then resetting the Super Game Boy from the main menu, and that doesn't do anything. So it just absolutely will not recognize a game in the Super Game Boy, though it does recognize the Super Game Boy. So I'll go ahead and put that Mega Man in there. See, it recognizes that with no problem. So on that note, I wanted to go ahead and test a couple of other things for the Super Nintendo based on that one recommendation. And I had tried the Game Genie, and it does not recognize the Game Genie at all. It seems to be 50-50 whether it will actually recognize the game that's inserted on top of the Game Genie. So I'll go ahead and try that now. And it does not recognize at all. So I'll pop it out, put it back in, and now it recognizes that I have Looney Tunes B-Ball inserted on top of the Game Genie, but it just does not recognize the Game Genie at all. So Game Genie does not work for the Retro Freak. I also wanted to test a Super Nintendo test cartridge, which is used basically as a diagnostic tool for a Super Nintendo, and that does not recognize at all. Now somebody had also asked me if it recognizes the mouse for Mario Paint, and I'll go ahead and insert that now. I will not install, and we'll go ahead and play. So as you'll see here, I also have, let me try that again. So I have the mouse attached to the controller adapter, and it actually does recognize the mouse, which is neat, I suppose. So there you see, the mouse does work for Mario Paint. So let's go ahead and get out of there. And you'll see also what happened right now is the Retro Freak went ahead and did a reset. I don't know why it does that, but it's been doing that a couple times since I've tried to record this video. I've tried to exit out of a game and it'll just reset the entire system. And the reason that this really annoys me is because the micro SD card is loaded up with ROMs, and it takes about 10 minutes for it to load up to where I can actually go ahead and play games off the SD card. So I'll take a break here because some of the things that I want. So I'll take a break here because one of the things that I wanted to show was on that micro SD card. All right, here we go. So the load time on the SD card is actually kind of So the load time with the SD card is not very consistent. It usually takes about 10 minutes. This time it took about 5. So anyway, I'll go into the Mega Drive slot on the SD card, and you'll see that there are a number of MK3 ROMs on there, and that is the Mark III or the Sega Master System. So this actually does play Sega Master System games off the SD card, though it does not have a cartridge slot for it. So let's check out Alex Kidd. And there you go. You can actually play Master System games off of this, and that's not something that's, or as far as I know anyway, it's not something that's advertised for the system, so that was a nice plus. Oh Lord. Probably not the best game to try on here. It's not. Ugh. So we'll go ahead and back out of there and go back to the main menu. See if there are any other comments that I want to address. Yeah, so as far as comments for the video or messages that I received, that was pretty much it. For the most part, it's been... let me try that again. Oh, one other comment that I want to get to before I go ahead and end this video. Somebody had asked me about the voltage on the power voltage on the unit and why that might be why a lot of people are having issues as far as the system just conking out on them. So the website lists this as a universal power adapter. The voltage is the same as the PSP, the American PSP. I couldn't quote that off the top of my head right now. But I have verified that it's exactly the same. God, I suck at this game. So I don't think there are any problems with the voltage. I think maybe it's just honestly a poorly constructed system. Yeah. Let me try that again. Let's go ahead and reset. Oh, one final comment that I want to hit on is somebody that asked if the manual mentions anything about the voltage for the unit since it's a Japanese market product, and if that might be why people are having issues with the system getting burnt out. The website posts that the AC adapter is a universal adapter. It's the same specs as the American PSP, and off the top of my head I can't remember what it was. I think it's DC 5 volt out, something like that. I don't remember. But I have verified. I looked at the PSP adapter and it's exactly the same. So I doubt that's it. I think it might be more of a quality control issue, to be honest with you. Again, I can't really say. I don't remember. I think it's Gadget that makes the product. I've never heard of them prior to actually reading about the system, so I don't know how reputable they are. I couldn't actually, comment on the quality of their products other than having used this, and I can't say that it's the greatest quality product, but it doesn't seem to be too bad either. So if anybody else has any comments, questions, concerns that they might want to address or ask, I'd be happy to take a look at what this thing can do and answer those questions. If you're on the fence about it, again, I always recommend PC emulation over spending $250 on this, because there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of reason to own it other than, novelty. But, if you're looking for an emulation system, I would certainly recommend this over the Retro Freak. And I think one of the major advantages of this over the Retro Freak is the fact that you can actually play ROMs off an SD card. Being that they're both emulation systems, I would think that you might want to... Being that they're both emulation systems, I would think that they would both do the same thing, but I guess there are some legal issues here in the US that Hyperkin was trying to avoid by not allowing you to do that. So the trade-off there is NES over TurboGrafx. If you prefer the NES, you'll want to get the Retron 5, and if you're a TurboGrafx guy, you'll want to get the Retro Freak. But you can also get a Famicom to NES adapter and play NES games on this. And again, so I hope you enjoyed. So I hope I was able to give a little bit more clear information on some of the things that this can't do. I'm sorry to the one person who wanted to complain, but my opinion stands. It's not a great system, in my opinion, and that doesn't really matter whether I prefer PC emulation or emulation systems. It's just a so-so system. I mean, it doesn't do anything spectacular, really. And again, the one thing that it does over all the others is allows you to play ROMs off an SD card, which is nice. So it still gets a 6 out of 10 for me. It does what it's supposed to do, but it does seem a little bit flimsy in certain areas, and I think the interface could be better. The controller could be better. There's supposed to be a Mega Drive, and I believe a Mega Drive and a Game Gear cartridge adapter coming in the near future, so that'll be nice. But that's one of those things that it's totally up to the user's preference. If you can play them off an SD card, then why not just play them off the SD card? And I'm sure they can add a bunch more systems that this thing will work with a simple software update, being that it is an emulation system. So maybe one of these days you'll see something like Jaguar or Nintendo 64 straight off the SD card. Alright, so I'm going to do a quick update on this, and I feel really stupid, but something I had noticed when I was trying to manage some of the ROMs in my card, or my SD card, is if you go in, let's go to the Mega Drive. So I had Game Gear games on here, however, I had them in zipped files, and I mentioned in my first video that you can't play ROMs off of zipped files. So the system actually does play Game Gear games, believe it or not, but they can't be in zip files. So I'm just going to add this to the end of the video to kind of show the Retro Freak playing Game Gear games, which is really awesome because there are so many Game Gear games that I wanted to play that I haven't played in a long time. This is not one of them. I've never actually played this before. I'm just using this as an example. Wow. But I will say that the control, it might be this game only, but the control on this seems really bad. Let me go ahead and exit out of there and play something else. Now I'm playing this with the standard Retro Freak controller. I probably should switch over to a Master System controller or a Sega Genesis controller. God, it's been forever since I played this. Yeah, the controller is much better on this one. So how freaking cool is that? You know, I've actually got to give them props to the Retro Freak this time on this, because playing Mega Drive or playing Game Gear games and Master System games is something that is not advertised at all, as far as I know, but it's completely possible if you play them off the SD card, which is great. Huge, huge plus. Jeez, I don't remember how to do anything on this. So, sorry for the mistake and the bumble there. Should have got that right the first time, but I screwed up and didn't unzip my files. So yeah, it does play Master System games right out of the box off the SD card, which is amazing. Huge, huge plus in my opinion.